Igrivacarda is Misha Owen o Bitesize Irish, and I was interviewed by Transparent Language by Bridgette over there. Because at Bitesize Irish, we're always working at helping people like you to learn and practice Gaeilge, our native language. And they had a week lately about language reclamation. And so we covered a couple of interesting topics. I really enjoyed the chat, and I'm sure you will. Bridgette gave us permission to share the interview. So here you go. And there's a link to the blog by Transparent Language under this video. So please follow them and check them out. And if you do enjoy this, you could even get in touch or leave a comment with them and say that Bitesize Irish sent you. Tógabh agus slán.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bridgette Cleary with Transparent Language Online. I'm the Client Engagement Associate here, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Owen of Bitesize Irish. So we're going to be interviewing him and learning a little bit about him and his organization. So Owen, thank you so much for being here, first off.
Well, gur míle agat. Thanks, Bridgette. Nice to meet you.
Yes, Kona Satatu, right? How are you?
Yeah, tá mé go maith, gur maith agat.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and what sparked your interest in language reclamation and really promoting the Irish language.
Yeah, my company is Bitesize Irish, and we've been going over a decade now, helping people really around the world to make the Irish language part of their everyday. And we say our motto is Gaeilge gach lá, which means Gaeilge is the name of the language. Now there's variations, even then there's dialects and everything, so it's a rich language, but Gaeilge gach lá, Irish everyday. Look, it wasn't my choice at the beginning. I was brought up with Irish with my parents, so I still speak Irish with my siblings, my parents. I went to all Irish language schooling, and then that was the end of that. I went to university, and that was through English and French. So especially I've got kids. I've got two sons. So it's Irish that we speak every day. Maybe without them, it wouldn't be in my life so much on a daily basis. But Irish is definitely in my life that way.
That's amazing. I am very jealous that you had the ability to grow up with Irish because, as you know, I've been taking some Irish classes. I love it. Um, can you tell me a little bit more about your organization and your efforts to reclaim the language? Like, why is it that you started Bitesize Irish?
I wanted a way for people to be able to approach the language in bite-sized pieces, so in little, very accessible pieces. So that's, I guess, runs through Bitesize Irish to this very day. I do say that I don't like to push the language on anybody, and in society in Ireland, I don't want to generalize, but people have this shared trauma of it's connected with the language, and it's not as negative as it was in my generation, like a generation ago growing up, right, as a kid. It's much more positive now. So we're in this ecosystem of there's positivity around the Irish language, which I would say was not there in the 80s, or very much smaller, say. So it's more acceptable in a way, and a lot of people have come back to the language. I don't want to overstate how successful the language is, but it's relatively good, good vibes, good energy, and there's a lot of people working through the language, like through the media, for example. Possibly a turning point was when we got TG Cahir, that's our TV, national TV station for the Irish language, in the 90s, late 90s possibly, I could be off. But that put the language in front of people a lot more. And even today, I heard someone just mention they watched some sports game on that TV channel. So it made it much more kind of commonplace that people saw that the language was part of their day, because you could live in Ireland without hearing the language at all. So it helped form that association. So with Bitesize Irish, we're part of that positive energy, I think. Modern Ireland, and it's a country that has changed so much in the last couple of decades too. So it's nice to be like part of that society that is changing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think too, about a decade ago, Ireland, um, or excuse me, Irish was recognized as a language within the EU. Correct?
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely, that's
That
right.
must have been a
Yeah.
big deal. Yeah, and I know that because I took some classes through Conrad na Gaeilge in Dublin online, and I remember my teacher as well had said that there seems to be a huge revival effort, and she said that her children now that there's like a wait to get into Irish speaking schools. So I'm really happy to hear that that's been changing and for the
Mm.
positive. So tell us a little bit more about Irish though, like where is it spoken within the country? Is it everywhere? Like how many speakers, maybe the history, like about its decline and kind of, you already spoke a little bit about where it's at
Yeah.
now, positive direction. um yeah, speak a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, look, at one stage, centuries ago, it was the widespread language. Perhaps maybe not in the cities. Maybe you have to go back more centuries to see it kind of being in any kind of principal town. I'm not a historian, so I don't want to kind of venture into that too far. But to jump to the modern day, we've got Gaeltacht is this, it's the official name of a region where the Irish language is spoken, or it's part of the community, right? And even those lines that were drawn on a map, they might not and they don't unfortunately reflect reality. So the actual areas where the language is being spoken as a community language are relatively tiny. Um, but I did love it this summer. Like I was on the beach in the Gaeltacht, and a woman passed me and said, "Do you go to Conastati?" And it took me by surprise, but it just showed me, yeah, the Irish language is in that community. There's Because it's such a minority language, there's a lot of people who speak the language and they're not native speakers per se. So through the education system, there's hundreds of thousands of people, uh, dealing with the language every day. And there are people who are not native speakers who have come back to the language with a love of the language. So people in Ireland, and they're making Irish part of their everyday, or they're studying in it. So in terms of community, where the language is like a native part of the community, it's really small. It's tiny, really. Um, but there is the story of the urban Irish speaker as well, where Irish is flourishing, say in Belfast City, where the community is there's community support and there's places where people go to speak Irish. Um, and I would see the urban centres being a real hub for the language into the future. We should protect our Gaeltacht areas as much as possible, so not to go away from that. But the urban Irish language story is interesting.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. As you know, my family's from Belfast, and when I was there, definitely in the I saw the Irish speaking portion. I saw a lot of the roads in both Irish and English,
Mm.
and I was really excited by that. But thank you for sharing that. And I'm curious though, could you tell us a little bit about why do we say Irish and not Gaelic? I mean, I remember the first question a lot of people would say to me, like, "Oh, you mean you're studying Gaelic?" I'm like, "No, I'm studying Irish." Can you talk a little bit about why it's called Irish?
Yeah, in modern day Ireland, Irish it's a noun. It's I speak Irish, and that's the phrase that's been adopted. You mentioned Conradh na Gaeilge, the Gaelic League, which was established, I think, in the late 1800s. And so they had Gaelic in the title. So there wasn't anything against the name of that. So, like I said before, Gaeilge is that's the official name, maybe, of the language in Irish. So, Gaelic is an anglicization of that word. And definitely people in Ireland would have said that they spoke Gaelic. Now, this is maybe generations back. So, immigrants leaving Ireland would have said, oh, my native language is Gaelic. So, it's not like the term got warped in translation as it traveled outside of Ireland. No, like historically, Irish people did say Gaelic. I venture to guess that maybe on nationalistic terms that there was this association of we're a country, we need a language. So it's Irish, it's the Irish language, the same as French or German. So I think it's probably this nationalistic thinking a century ago that really took the phrase and made sure that it was called Irish instead of Gaelic. And we definitely call it Irish now in Ireland.
Great, thank you. And there are three main dialects, correct? So we have Munster, Connacht, and then the third one being, I can't remember.
Ulster.
Ulster, yeah. So in the Ulster Irish is the Belfast area, Northern Ireland. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. And is there, would you say, um, a big difference between the three? Are they pretty, you know, intelligible between the three?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Bridget, because a lot of learners who come to the language, especially outside of Ireland, see it as an obstacle because there are dialects that they're afraid that they're learning the wrong words or mixing dialects. So, look, generations ago, before the media, before national broadcasting, um, the accents and dialects were so specialized that I'm sure that each town, each village had its own terminology. So with the industrialization of the country, um, people heard each other more often. And now on Radio na Gaeltachta, our national service in Irish on the radio, people speak their own dialect, interestingly, and they hear the other dialects all the time. So it's not like that there's this correct Irish that people veer towards. They speak their Irish and the other person speaks their Irish. So you could have a Connacht, Connemara person speaking with an Ulster person and they use their own Irish. So that's interesting. We do have a standardized, it's called An Caidan, the standard, especially for spelling and for like phrases. It's quite strong in that way. So we do have this set way of how the language should be written. But is there like, I don't think the Caidan officially tells us how to pronounce words. There's pronunciation rules. So I'm getting too technical maybe, but yeah, there are different dialects. How different are they? You can get different phrases for sure, even for saying hello, how are you, do good to. That will vary depending on your region. But interestingly, like it is the same language in the end. There's some grammatical nuances that I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but someone who has studied Irish grammar more closely would be very familiar with those differences. Yeah, so it does exist, but if we've got potential learners listening to this interview, don't let that put you off.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. So can you talk to me a little bit about some unexpected challenges that you've run into and that your organization has run into in, reclaiming the language or attracting new learners to the language?
Yeah, on one hand, it's been hard to get kind of national or state support. We're a commercial organization. We are it's profit driven. It's a company, right? It's not a charity. So it's been hard to kind of find our niche there. And I'm based in Limnach, in Limerick City. It's not the Gaeltacht region, so there's no special treatment for companies there. Uh, but really, I enjoy the flexibility of we're an independent company with no constraints, so nothing is holding us back in terms of grants or whatever either. So I like that. I suppose pronunciation for new learners, it surprises them. So it's always kind of a good reminder for me when a new learner will come to the language and see how foreign the written language seems to be. Um, but actually, like there are spelling rules, there are pronunciation rules, and we've got a very nice, very standard spelling rule as well in the Irish language, where you have the slender vowels I and E. They can only come together, and you can't get A or U coming on the other side of a consonant. So the pattern is actually quite predictable when you start learning how the words are written and spelt. So yeah, from the learner's perspective, I guess it always catches me because I've done it in my schooling, but for someone who hasn't done the Irish language, hasn't been exposed to it in school, that's really a challenge for them. Yeah.
Yeah, of course I did find it challenging, but at the same time, really rewarding for that reason, right? Because when you start to pick up on those little rules, it's just all starts to come together, and then it's definitely more rewarding for that reason. I actually have one of those glance cards, those grammar glance cards that it's just, a foldable card, and it's really nicely laid out all of the rules, and you just follow along with it. So I feel like for a learner, um, yeah, like you said, there's patterns, there's rules, and you learn that and you apply them.
Yeah, and I'll jump to the sound of the language as well. Like I spoke with Kira Hay. She is well-known person online who has been working through the Irish language and arts online for the past decade. So you can find her on YouTube easily. And I was speaking to her about the sound of the language, and she was very slow. I think this is my interpretation of her argument, very slow to say that the language sounds musical or in any way special compared to any other language. But I do have to say that the sound of the spoken Irish language does seem to have a special and nice rhythm to it. So it's quite an attractive language to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, as you know, I'm part of Bitesize Irish, and so I'm part of your Bitesize Grow program. And so I'm on your forum with everyone. And I remember one week we all shared an Irish poem, and in discovering one, on YouTube and being able to hear the Irish of the poetry and then hear the English. You're right. It's like there's the beauty of a language and knowing a language, especially for literary purposes, and it's you just experience something in an emotion like you do in poetry so differently in that language. But yeah, I do find Irish especially beautiful. But what are some of your biggest success or little victories that you've had, would you say?
It comes down to the individual learners for me, the individual success stories. I'll never say that Bite Size Irish is fully the reason for somebody for becoming more fluent in the Irish language. You can't learn in an island like that. I actually think you should immerse yourself in the language as much as you can. And seeing successful learners, seeing people uh, tune in to the curiosity that's built within them. There's some kind of drive within them that gets them to really like take on the language and see it as a positive challenge. I find language learning very interesting because there's a lot of psychology involved. Like you can beat yourself up so easily and think that you're not good enough, not learning fast enough. Um, so for me to learn from these positive learners, and they do jump ahead so fast. Like we have one interview on YouTube on Bitesize Irish channel with Jim, and he has never been to Ireland, but his spoken Irish is nice, and he really jumped forward and was self motivated. Um, yeah, so it's really being able to expose myself to these positive learners. Growth mindset is a, a separate term. This type of approach, it has been termed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's all about your outlook on it, and also perhaps the reason for which you're learning, right? Which I know for me, I was interested in taking classes, and I've discovered Bite Size Irish because I recently became an Irish citizen, as I've told you, and so it was all about kind of reclaiming, my heritage, feeling closer to my roots. My grandmother was from Belfast. I still have family there. I've been there. Unfortunately, they don't speak the language, given, historically Belfast, Northern Ireland. So they never had the chance to kind of reclaim their language either. But um, as you said, there's been like this seemingly grassroots, in the urban centers, people such as yourself that are really kind of coming together and revitalizing everything. So it's quite amazing. So that's great. Everyone's positive growth mindset, and that's your it's called bite size grow for that reason too, I think, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
like
Absolutely.
language wise, but also like just challenge yourself, right? And just mentally kind of grow as a person too.
Absolutely. While being kind to yourself. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's so easy to judge ourselves in learning a language, and you're good enough already.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, Tell me a little bit about how you guys reach people and how you spread the word about your efforts and all the great work that you do.
Yeah, probably the most fun way is through YouTube. We've got a YouTube channel, Bitesize Irish, and if you subscribe there, I'll do a little plug. We've got monthly Q&A sessions, live sessions. So we get people to send in questions beforehand, and the team do some research on the answers beforehand, and then um, we take like questions during the chat as well. Um, so it's been really fun because you get the direct energy of people. People are really curious, and you get to see the same people over and over again. So there's some familiarity, um, and it's as a company, it's hard to find something that we can do that's different enough, that's useful, that's helpful, and it's been our way of trying to help people. It's really, we try to reach out by being helpful. That's our core strategy, and yeah, it's actually really fun on YouTube.
Yeah, you guys have definitely created a really great community, I would say. And I know I've watched your YouTube videos before, um, especially with Siobhan really pronouncing things very slowly and repeating them. And I've always found them really, really helpful. So, but that's amazing that you guys have created such a positive community online. Very cool. Tell me a little bit about your hopes for the future of the Irish language. What are some of your hopes for the future and your aspirations for the future?
Yeah, as a country, I would hope that we can get past our shared national trauma, and that we can really embrace the language for what it is, something really positive. It doesn't have to be anything that's forced upon anybody. Um, so, yeah, I don't see a monolingual Ireland speaking Irish as a future of the country. But uh, Ireland has an interesting future ahead of it as well, with potential reunification with Northern Ireland, potentially a new approach, like a new version of the Republic. So that's very interesting, and it's really easy for the language to get politicized, unfortunately, because of the emotions involved. But I would hope that the Irish language can be a positive and supported uh, part of Ireland, where we're proud of that culture, and that we help people around the world, which we do. Like we fund universities around the world to help teach Irish, for example. And yeah, we have to keep investing. And it comes down to the young people a lot as well. So supporting them, um, and making the language feel like something that belongs to them rather than something that's just being taught to them.
And what would you say if someone wanted to get involved with Irish? What would you suggest?
Yeah, we can tell ourselves that we need a huge step forward, and psychologically, again, it's interesting because we we pick a goal that's too big, and a lot of people just get it's too daunting, and you give up. So make it fun. Um, you don't need to buy anything. There's plenty of resources online, like TG Cahir, TG4 TV station. You can stream a bunch of shows right now online. You won't understand a single word, but just to dive into the language and try to find fun ways to make it part of your everyday. A lot of people love Irish traditional music, Irish singing. So that's another way. But some people speak to their pet in Irish, is another way. So to learn some words. So yeah, adapt it to yourself and make it fun.
I love that. So that's really goes to show your thought behind bite-sized Irish, right? Is what you had said earlier, that just take it a little bit of a time every day, right? Just little bite sizes. I love that. Oh,
Exactly.
perfect. And if there's someone who wants to start reclaiming, their own language, their own indigenous language or critically endangered language, right? What is like your number one advice to them?
Possibly because of the colonial background, it's shame around the language is what the colonizers did to the people of Ireland. There's shame attached to the language, and I can only assume that endangered indigenous languages around the world, that it has been a shared history like that in a lot of regions in the world. Um, so how can we get past that shame? And the way I see it, there's that positive energy around the Irish language. So to build that positive energy, and maybe we do need to mourn the loss of what could have been. But that's one stage. But I think we can end up with at a positive place.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. So to end, we really would love it if you could teach us a phrase in your language, either a greeting or a common expression, whatever you have in mind.
Look, Dialects is a funny one already. It means hello, but there's a few layers to it. Um, there's that throaty sound, Dialects, and we write it with like
Dia,
GH.
yeah, dia, which,
Yeah,
dia,
really
which.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very nice. Yeah.
What's it literally
Um,
mean though? It means hello, but
yeah, like Gia is God.
Mhm.
So God to you. Um, and I can only assume that the word Gia is like Latin based, so it's like deity, right? So it's not
Mhm.
even such an unfamiliar word in itself. So Gia and Giahuit, God to you. So you're offering the blessings of the universe to the person that you're speaking with. And that's a pretty nice way to say hello, I think.
Yeah, that is a great way. Which, and then I know they then say Dios muera,
Yeah.
which in when someone says hello to you, right? Gio, which you respond Dios muera, which. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, that's definitely the Christianity coming in. So God and Mary to you. So the Virgin Mary. So there, it even goes further. They say, they joke. So yeah, it's traditionally like that. I would never say that with my family. Like I'd say hi, possibly Jiret, and we don't go into the more formal or more traditional forms of the dialogue. But like you say, like the language encapsulates such interesting parts of the culture. Um, just for example, an easy example is in Irish, emotions are upon you. You are not your emotions, but they come upon you. So very kind of aligned to Buddhist thinking, just for example. So there's wisdom there. There's the Christianity centuries in the language as well. So jihuit as a phrase, there's a lot of strands of interesting history, even with that one little phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting. And I love that you just touched upon the fact that language really could influence your perspective of the world and of others and even of yourself, where, things are emotions are upon you. I love that. It's really beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Owen, for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it. And if there's any last things you want to say, maybe to anyone who might be interested in getting to know a little bit about Bitesize Irish, we could definitely put a link to your organization if you'd like.
Yeah, fantastic. And people are free to get in touch. So if you get to the Bite Size Irish website, bitesize.irish, and there's a contact us form, like we like to try to help people with answer some questions, and we might be able to point you in the right direction.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much, Owen. So have a good rest of your day.
Good, thank you, Bridget. Slán.